But I used to go visit relatives in North Dakota out on the farm. And you kind of, you stayed out on the farm all week long, but then on Saturday night, man, you got cleaned up and you went to town. And everybody was there. So, and when we moved to Armour, I kind of half expected that to go on, and it didn't really.
Where Britain is situated, we're 60 miles from Aberdeen. We're 40 miles from Webster, 40 miles from Sisseton, 40 miles from Oaks, North Dakota. All communities similar in size to us with the exception of Aberdeen. And all these communities had theaters at one time and they closed. This was all during the late 70s, early 80s.
Lots of towns still have their movie theater on Main Street, but it's been converted to a TV shop or whatever.
The theater near my hometown in Tracy closed when I was in college and became a racquetball court.
This has been a barber shop for 100 years, but the theater has always been next door. It was next door for a long time, yeah. Then they changed it into a bowling alley after that.
Yeah, they turned it into a bowling alley.
As everyone in the Midwest knows, the 1980s were not kind to rural America. And a lot of businesses have closed their doors. That was the fate of this building. It would have probably turned into a parking lot.
The old one-time theater that Platt had when we were younger kids, movies stopped showing about 1975. It was falling down, the windows were falling out, and the doors were plywood, it shut.
That's been closed since the early 70s.
The last time they had movies, I don't really know.
In the late 70s, I'd say, mid-70s was the last time.
And E.T. was the last movie shown here. We do know that in the early 80s.
The last movie before it closed was Jaws. I do remember that.
There is a creature alive today who has survived millions of years of evolution. Without change, it lives to kill.
I left here in the 60s, and I felt like I grew up in the heydays of the small town. It was absolutely a busy, bustling place. There was a farm on every mile.
I believe December of '85 was the last movie they showed.
So you guys remember when it closed down?
It was a drag because our next closest theater was Aberdeen, which is 60 miles away.
The closest theater was 45 minutes away in Mitchell.
They would go to Watertown or Brookings
or Sioux Falls.
Because there wasn't any theaters even in any of the small towns.
Winter has a theater which is 30 miles, but otherwise you would have to travel to Wagner or possibly Platt, I believe.
So if they wanted to take in a movie, they had to go all the way to Mitchell. That's 70 some miles away. It was big. You basically had to spend a lot more money. I know when I was growing up, either drove Maine all night, or you had to go out 100 miles plus.
So did you guys go to Aberdeen quite a bit? Go to movies?
I did, all the time. A lot of driving around.
A small town theater is very similar to a small town school. Once that school is consolidated and moves out of the community suffers. And I think it's the same with the theater.
We need that, and we need our own people to support our own local theaters.
At one time, your other theater that was maybe 30 miles away or 40 miles away, they were your stiff competition, and boy, they were the enemy. You didn't help them out, and they didn't help you out. If you tore gear out of a projector, they might have 3 of them that would work, but they wouldn't loan one to you, because, geez, you were the enemy. Let you sit dark, and that was the way it happened.
In preparation for the night's movie, you'd have to splice the previews together and check the cue points and so on, and there's usually anywhere 4, 5, 6 reels for the movie. They were Simplex, was the brand name on them, and it had big, huge, almost like a barrel, carbon arc lamps that we used to produce enough light to get on here to the screen. And it was the same film we use now, I imagine, the 35 millimeter film. But now they're all spliced together in one big long reel. But we'd change about every 18, 19 minutes, we'd be changing from one reel to another.
The thing about running those is it's much more involved for the projectionist because they're up here constantly threading a machine and doing things.
Around here, one night got the wrong reel back in a Western and brought some guy back to life that had been shot 20 minutes earlier.
It was skill and art.
You can still see the cue points, the cue marks in the screen nowadays.
You're looking at 20 or 21 minutes and this reel is done. You've got to make a changeover to the other projector to the next reel of the movie. If somebody isn't up here and that reel comes to an end, you're in trouble. In the latter part of the 60s, a lot of the indoor theaters, just especially the smaller ones, just disappeared.
The same family that ran it for so many years aged and they just couldn't handle it anymore, so they tried to sell it.
The ones that were left were theaters that, had somebody to pass them down to.
We owned and operated the theater there from 1949 until 1953.
Did you ever make money?
No, I think the year we sold, we had a fire and had to replace the screen and a few other things and do the cleaning. And we lost $181 that year, so we thought, oh no, this is enough of this.
So because it was a smaller town, they really couldn't afford remodelings over the years.
They didn't accommodate people in our communities the way they used to, because the multiplexes came about in Aberdeen and other communities, and you had your choice of movies. Instead of one every night, you could go see 3, in a day if you wanted to.
In the 60s and 70s, a lot of theaters that survived got a modernization treatment, a cheap modernization of red indoor-outdoor carpet, paneling on the walls in the lobby, and draped the auditorium. And they totally ruined them.
It's a large building, and it cost a lot to heat it, quite a bit to cool it.
These buildings were built back when building costs were cheap, fuel costs were cheap, and they weren't built energy efficiently.
I can tell you one memory. I remember one time I was there. There wasn't many people in the theater, and there was popcorn on the floor, and the rats were picking it up.
As they were getting to be so hard to maintain.
And movies were just kind of down at that time.
Print availability. There's a couple of years where they're just, the supply of movies was pretty small.
Just film companies made it less profitable for small towns.
They wanted a percentage on the better movies, and he really couldn't afford the percentages, and by the time he could get them here, people had been to Aberdeen, maybe Fargo, someplace else.
It became not unusual to go to Mitchell. You did shopping out of town, and there was less shopping to be done in town, and I think society just changed somewhat.
It didn't bother them to drive to Mitchell or someplace else, and they weren't staying in their hometowns.
There were just a lot of opportunities for different entertainment around.
And it closed just lack of attendance.
Television. Everybody by that time had television.
Television mostly.
Television.
Television.
Well, TV.
I think that's what ruined it, is the television. The television came and then came in and they stayed home and watched TV.
And renting movies shut it down.
Do you know how long it was shut down for?
Boy, I'll bet it's 20 years. I don't know for sure, but it's a long time, 15 years at least.